Hello and welcome to the webinar. This is a manufacturing public policy webinar. It's our monthly update on what is going on in Washington that impacts small and medium-sized manufacturers. This website, or this, not this website, this webinar is brought to you by the National Tooling and Machining Association and the Precision Metal Forming Association. I'm Caitlin Sickles with the Policy Resolution Group at Bracewell. Also on the webinar today, you'll hear from Paul Nathanson, also at Bracewell, and you'll hear from Omar Nashashibi at Inside Beltway. For those of you who are on the webinar who also joined us in Washington this week for the annual fly-in for manufacturers, we're very grateful for everybody's participation. You might know that we got a little write-up in Politico Influence about the fly-in. You can see it here. It's nice to get a little shout out for participation and reaching out to members of Congress here in Washington. We will include that in press clips for the associations who get those. So if people want to check it out, but always nice to get a mention, particularly this time of year when, as folks who are here in Washington can tell you, the Hill is awash with advocates from across the country coming to raise their issues. So nice that the one voice broke through into Politico. There's a lot to cover on this webinar. This is a quick update of what is in this slide deck. As always, we won't cover every single thing, but the slide deck, which is available on the One Voice Info website, as well as sent around to registrants for the webinar, is always available for your review later so that you can click through and see all the different topics that are covered and of significance each monthly update. So with all of that in mind, we will start where we usually do on what is going on in Congress. When we last connected, Congress was at a little bit of a stalemate ahead of a spring or Easter recess. Omar, I will turn it to you and give an update on what's happened since Congress has been back in session. Particularly, I know folks are really watching funding bills, funding and tax bills. So over to you, Omar.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, that's right. We've got last week here and this week, we're very heavy with cabinet members coming up the last few days to Capitol Hill and testifying on different budgets. The House Appropriations Committee has put out its schedule for when it's going to be moving on legislation. The one that handles manufacturing extension partnership programs, for example, is supposed to clear committee at the end of the month on April the 30th. The defense bill for you in the defense industrial base, it looks like that's not going to move till the end of June is what the committee schedule is, which is quite late for that legislation. We're hearing that is due in part because of the ongoing conflict in Iran and the war efforts there, and getting a better sense of what the final spend number might be. So they're delaying that one a little bit, but to your point, they are moving pretty quickly here on trying to at least assemble what some of the government spending might look like, which will ultimately be punted to the end of the year. What they're looking at right now in the short term is their second round of reconciliation. Just a refresher of what this process is. It allows the Senate to bypass the 60 vote threshold, so you don't need to use the minority party, just like the Democrats did on Obamacare with no Republicans, and Republicans did twice on taxes without Democrats. That's called the reconciliation process. This week, the Senate started that formality of moving a budget resolution. It's focused right now on ICE and Customs and Border Protection funding, which are the main two areas that have been holding up a broader effort to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. So this would be a Republican-only bill that they've been focused on, and the House may take it up next week, although the House Republicans, some of them believe that they should be expanding this legislation to go beyond just ICE and CBP funding and to cover taxes and other policies that they'd like to see addressed. And the concern with that is it becomes difficult to do on the president's timeline. Reconciliation is the one that where we believe will probably be one of the main pieces of legislation that actually do move this year. And if there's a third round, we're skeptical it happens prior to the election, given how many cuts that they would likely require in there on spending. So if they do a third reconciliation, that might include tax and trade provisions on which we'll be working. That might be posted until after the election in what we call a lame duck session. But looking ahead of right now, the next few weeks, it's a sprint for both chambers to try to get at least CBP and ICE funding and potentially some other areas, and that might open up next week as we get some more intel when the House comes in, probably about Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon rather. The House will be back in, and so we'll see where that goes from there. On the funding, we mentioned manufacturing extension partnerships programs, the MEPs. Those were zeroed out in the proposal. What a PBR is a president's budget request. Every president releases their budget. Usually it's in February. Here we are in April. It came out and it's called for zero money for the MEP. This is not the final government spending. The president proposes, Congress disposes. Last year, same thing. The president didn't, or his team and the administration didn't want any money for the MEP program. They were trying to zero it out, and then Congress came in and gave it $175 million. So just want to flag for you where some of the key, at least on the workforce side, programs are coming out in terms of the priorities for the administration as we continue to move forward with Capitol Hill to restore some of the funding proposed cuts, not actual cuts they've made. And that's what you see here. Enacted is a fancy word for saying this is what they actually passed into law. And the PBR is not what some of you in the Midwest think it is. It's the president's budget request. So that's kind of where we land there. Let's start off here in regulatory. We're going to spend most of our time on the CAPE system for refunds, knowing that that's probably what most individuals have interest in. But we do want to bring to your attention on the updated HEAT National Emphasis Program. This is not a proposed HEAT rule, but this is OSHA after the expiration of the 2022 National Emphasis Program Indoor and Outdoor Heat Hazard Rule proposal. Come out. It lasted for 3 years. Trump extended it for one. What an NEP is, it instructs OSHA inspectors to focus on a certain aspect of safety within the workplace. You've got NEPs for hearing, or that's a regional emphasis program that covers Missouri and other parts. You've got national emphasis programs on combustible materials, and this one is on heat. As it sounds, it's effective on April the 10th. It is covering select industries. Here are your NAICS codes. It's not going to cover the primary of our industries here in the associations. We probably are going to have some associate members that might be under 3335 NAICS codes for metalworking machinery manufacturing. Same thing with a few others on here as well. But this doesn't mean you're excluded if you're not on the list. This is just the higher priority of the non-construction industries where they've identified to likely have heat-related incidents and hazards. So everyone must still comply with safe workplaces, general duty clause, but this is an added emphasis here. What we did, and we'll disclaimer, this was an AI used here that we checked on a few points, that this is under the previous NEP that expired 2 weeks ago and under the new ones. We want to flag just a couple things. You've seen some of the data here. 2,400 heat inspections per year is what OSHA is saying. That is significant under the emphasis since we've gotten to the 2022 range as well. But note that there's no longer a 100% inspection growth deleted. This traces back to Biden saying he was going to hire 1,000 OSHA inspectors. They have a couple of categories that have been removed, and then they've also added a few other areas that for those of you that saw yourselves on the NAICS list, you'll have 90 days in order to kind of have a grace period to get up to speed on what you need to be doing. They made some changes, removing the buddy system and so whatnot. But again, remember that you still have a number of requirements due to safe work environment and heat recognized as a hazard. Anything that's identified must be addressed, and that still remains the same. In touring some of your shops, you've got a few of these ladders that are there. And so just on the OSHA's walking working surfaces, which addresses fixed ladders that extend more than 24 feet above a lower level, it must be equipment with personal fall arrest systems or ladder safety systems. So there's some added changes that are coming here on this that applies to anything over 24 feet that requires a transition to ladder safety. in place of cages or wells. And so there's some additional changes that are coming on there as well. If you've got one of these out there, you've got a 2036 deadline. You know, sounds like a ways away, but if you're doing new builds, new constructions, be aware of some additional potential changes. Float that out there. If you've got one over 24 feet, send it to the person that's got to be paying attention to all this stuff. Joint employer, we've been dealing with this now going back literally over a decade to the Obama eras where they worked to change the definition of who is an employer under the joint employer rule and under wage and hour division. We're now trying to go back to yet another proposed rule on this busy slide. What you'll see is where we are right now, that there really isn't a uniform federal test, that it's a case by case basis right now, and that's where they're looking to basically get a little bit more streamlined. Who's doing the hiring and firing? Who supervises that individual schedule and conditions? Who's setting the rate of pay and how they're getting paid and maintaining the employee records? And so that way you're not having more than one, whether it's a staffing agency or a related employer. There's a little bit more clear definition, and this is a proposal that they're looking to work on. This is for your reference. If you are an ESOP, affects more than just ESOPs, but if you are not an ESOP, someone else is dealing with this for you. If you are, this deals with proxy advisors and some of the investment advice that they can give on there and some of the valuations under a fairness standard. If any of this makes sense to you, then this one will be important to you. If it does not, then skip it. Department of Labor Foreign Labor Abuse Assessment Tool. This is something new that DOL has recently launched, and the timing of it really does align with what the Department of Commerce and U.S. Trade Representative are doing in the USTR investigation on forced labor leading to injuries to U.S. manufacturing base. So just note that they've been putting out this tool, and when I see the government in multiple places speaking from the same sheet at the same time, it tells me that you are looking at a whole of government type of approach on this. So now they're telling you here how you can comply before we come and how you can prevent before we send enforcement upon you as well. On the workforce side, I know the team over at NTMA and Jenny and PMA and Connie have been doing a lot of work getting ready for National Apprenticeship Week, and many of you all as well have been doing so and holding events. If you are doing a National Apprenticeship Week event next week, please do contact PMA and NTMA so we can make ourselves aware of that, and the team over at Bracewell, the experts that can help promote it. And then you can also submit this to the Department of Labor to help include it in their overall plan. The EEOC, just some additional data that's come out there in terms of the different inquiries. They responded to 270 inquiries and processed 88,000 new discrimination charges. And this is one of those spaces where when we have a new administration of a different party, we want to caution folks, doesn't mean it's less enforcement. It just might mean a different type of enforcement. And there's still some significant action going on there. Here's one where we're trying to bring money back to you. This was announced just after the webinar we had the other month, so we're including it here from March the 31st. The Small Business Administration is really in hyperdrive in a lot of places. They're now adjusting this, what was international trade loan program here, where they're now expanding it to cover not just export activities, but other areas in terms of what a manufacturer can do under your NAICS codes, with now can give you a 90% guarantee on a 7A instead of a 75%, whether you're diversifying your supply chains, building more inventory. So that's also pretty significant. That's there as well. For you North Carolina folks, just want to flag interest-free period as well for SBA as relate to some disasters and some extra time on your EIDL loans. This will impact some of our members. Flagging that as well for our Minnesotans on PFAS. The reporting deadline has been extended there to September 15th, and those reports will still be due on the February 1st. So one more extension similar to what we saw from the EPA previously on the PFAS from the 2011 reportings have been extended a bit as well for the larger users on that side of it. All right, on to the tariff refund process. And before Paul unmutes, I will go ahead and disclaim it. Nothing here shall be construed as legal or broker advice. We're just trying to provide the latest education and information that we can. Here's what CBP has now done. These are the tariffs that were ruled illegal by the U.S. Supreme Court on February the 20th. There is roughly $166 billion worth of tariffs that are eligible for refunds. This first tranche that opened up on April the 20th will handle $127 billion worth of those refunds that are owned to importers of record, a key phrase we will keep using for the next 4 slides. And what the administration did is it set up a process that will send back and refund the money to the importers of record who paid the government or the broker directly for the IEEPA tariffs. This is not 232 steel aluminum. This is not 301 China. It is just on the IEEPA. The importer has to upload a comma separated file, a CSV file, looks like an Excel spreadsheet that goes up into the ACE system. They're going to validate all the entries, calculate it, make sure that you're only submitting HTS codes that are aligned with the IEEPA, that are not covering the 232s. General duty rates are not included in refunds. AD/CVDs are not included in refunds. This is a limited scope to that $127 billion for this first phase, and it opened up 4 days ago on Monday morning on April the 20th at 8 a.m. The way this is supposed to work is once you put it in the very last, there's going to be a checkbox where it's a declaration. I've had a few clients fill this out. I know, Paul, you've talked to some folks that have as well on your side. And once you get through, go ahead, Paul.
No, no, I just, yeah, some have had a good, I think more have had okay experiences, but some have had a lot of crashing, and I think it depends on the number of entries you're trying to put in.
That's exactly right. And Paul, to that line you see right there, you're allowed to do up to 10,000 entries per declaration. And how that affects many of you who are importers of record, it means your broker is probably submitting for multiple clients all at once, just because that's the process allows them to. The key for you here is if you are the importer of record, that means you have standing to file, then there's expecting a refunds within about 90 days after acceptance. There's a period after 45, and then there's a 60 and a 90 in these trigger points of the reviews. And that's assuming there's no issues that are on here because not everything's getting done. If you're dealing with a foreign trade zone, a duty drawback, if there's a protest, if it's going outside to a final liquidation, as we said last month, that's going to get kicked into phase two. This is your guidebook. Again, we're going to qualify this. If you are the importer of record, then you've got a case to go yourself file for a refund for the IEEPA tariffs you paid, or have the customs broker do it on your behalf. If you're not an importer of record, that means you paid an intermediary, you paid a supplier, somebody else. You are in a very different position than an importer of record. You cannot go in here and request your money back that you paid to that middle person, but you can look in here and get a better sense of what this new process is. It's being run through the ACE, the Automated Commercial Environment System, through which all imports and exports are processed at the broker and also the importer of record level. And just to differentiate, your customs broker is not your importer of record. They're acting on behalf of you. You are still the importer of record if you are the one that's directly receiving that product that's in there. And here's what they're talking about doing, and reconciliation and not eligible for that phase one. We mentioned some of those that are there, and to make sure that manufacturers that are submitting these refunds are segregating out your 232s and your 301s. You don't want to put anything in this file that's going to delay and send you down to the audit process. And you're also going to want to now think about, what if I'm not the importer of record? What strategies can I employ here? Again, we're not giving you advice, but relaying what some others might have been telling us that they're doing as well. You've obviously got suppliers that paid the tariffs on your behalf, and those suppliers are the ones that are likely seeking a refund. Are they doing so? Are they doing it properly? Are they remembering to include yours? And if they even ask for it, are they going to notify you when they get a refund? A lot of this, if you're not the importer of record, is having some transparency on what your supplier or those who paid the tariffs on your behalf or to whom you sent the money is going to be doing. When did they submit it? So now you can start going back to that 60 or 90-day timeline to begin tracking when to expect them to receive funds. So then you can, and there's another layer of this, is that there's interest involved. The government is directed to pay interest, which is accruing at $650 million a month under this ruling. And that's part of the impetus to move quickly as well. That's a lot of money to have to also send out that Trump doesn't seriously want to do. So this is now the legal language that you can see in here. The next slide will have the correct CBP link, but the CAPE declarations, how they're submitted at the importer of record level or by the customs broker that filed the entries on behalf of that IOR. And that's where it'll say here that the refunds will be issued to the importer of record or their designated original entry. That's the way it's going to end up going in there. Is there a validation? Yes, there is. You'll submit all of the list of entries, or the custom broker is going to file that on your behalf. You're going to do your declaration. That's your legal paperwork that signs it, that has all that information there, and then get it all updated. You can in a way, and I do not have an ACE refund, an ACE account. I cannot get in there on my own. Those that you do have, there are mechanisms that they are reporting that you can go in here and take a look at your refund status as well. Although that seems to track more with the general refunds, but it also seems to be now similar for the CAPE process. And then what entries are covered by the phase one release of CAPE, and we've just covered those. It's $127 billion out of the 166 billion, and the others that are not included in here, they have a duty drawback claim. That means you are claiming that you're exporting it, therefore you shouldn't have to pay the tariff. Then also there's another area of protest. You notice that what they want is they don't want you to file more protests on this. Entries that are covered by an open protest, they are not going to be eligible. So if you just filed a protest simply to have a place in line, they're asking you to withdraw the protest and then you can submit your refund request through the CAPE portal. And that's again where they say you're prohibited from doing a duty refund by filing a PSC. You've got to go through the CAPE system. A PSC is a post summary correction. Here's to help you visualize. This is our last slide on this CAPE process on importation. We're going to get into the 232s next, and welcome Paul and others to weigh in. But here's what this will look like when you go in the step-by-steps in what you're going to have to upload. There's, again, go down below. You can take a look. But for those of you who are importers of record, this is some of the information you will need to see. There's some troubleshooting guides as well. They're trying to simplify it, it seems, as much as possible, to the extent, and honestly, it does seem, if you know your stuff in terms of, and you're not a first timer and you're familiar with the ACE system, you should probably be okay with this. To Paul's point, I had one client, she only had 8 HTS codes, and given she only had 8, she got it done pretty quickly on Monday morning, right when it opened. But to Paul's point, some of the bigger ones, you might have some issues. So for those of you that were looking for some help on what to do next on both if you're an importer of record and if you are not, hopefully that found that somewhat useful there. It's the latest we've got from the government. They
Omar,
are going to be, go ahead,
I
Paul.
would only add two things. One, to my knowledge, the entries are not going to be public. So if you're wondering if somebody has gotten a refund, that information is not going to be available. And I will only mention that the president put on Truth Social that he would appreciate if people didn't apply for refunds, and then he would think kindly of you in the future.
I like the inverse threat. At least he's getting a little bit better about it, right?
Exactly.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate both those because that's exactly why you want to have that communications with your suppliers, since it's not going to be transparency in this process, and you've just got to start that clock when you think you can. We're going to spend here a few slides. This is very significant to our membership. We're all aware of the Section 232 tariffs that were up to 50% on steel, aluminum, and copper. We're also very aware of the derivatives. We've discussed this. A derivative is a part or a product or a tool or a die that's made out of steel or aluminum or copper. Last year, the administration kept expanding the list of parts that are made out of steel that are covered by the tariffs, got to the point where $251 billion worth of steel parts were covered by tariffs, but only $31 billion worth of steel was covered by tariffs. So then in effort to try to rein in some of the expansions, people were trying to include, tea bags on this and cookie sheets and muffin tins and all these onto the steel list and aluminum list. The president put out a proclamation on April the 2nd that did a number of things. It terminated that 232 inclusion process, so companies could not include virtually what they wanted on this list. It pretty much removed commerce from being the primary focus of this whole process of including and expanding the derivative list to include more products. What they are doing now is they put things into different categories. They are allowing for duty drawback. Again, if you are importing a product that's going to be used or then exported, you typically can petition the government to not pay a tariff. And then there are some other areas where they're going to have lower tariff rates. But here's what's really important. They took the steel, aluminum, and copper and they split it up into different annex. They removed a bunch of items. Less of a concern for you was those on Annex 2. What matters for you all is still most of your steel and aluminum remains on Annex 1A, which is their new annex they created at 50% rate. There are a significant number of derivatives, products that were made out of steel or aluminum, that were moved on to 1B. That's at 25% rate. Then there's goods on Annex 3. That's going to include some tooling, some dies. That's temporarily at 15% through December 31 of 2027. That's when it jumps to 25% on January 1st. So in their effort to to simplify this whole process, they might have ended up making this more complicated. The question that just came in is very timely, that also came up in our congressional meetings during the fly-in. With the aluminum smelter in the Gulf down, is there any discussion on relaxing aluminum tariffs? If you all remember, there was an article even in the Wall Street Journal. Ford was the feature of it. I think it was A3, and it was talking about their approach to the White House about the smelter up in New York that supplies a lot of the aluminum going to Ford and others, and the fire there taking a lot of material offline and still asking for relief from the tariffs, and the administration saying no. And so, yes, this question is being asked, can we get some aluminum relief due to the global issues going on, and even here at home? And right now, the administration is sticking by that and saying no to it. And a lot of that aluminum that's coming in appears on that Annex 1A. So for you to see the actual technical side of it here, for those that are importers, take a look at this. This is the new CSMS that was issued. This is effective April the 16th. It was subsequently updated, I believe, on the 13th. And so now you're seeing here of where you can get the actual 50% of your derivatives, the articles of steel, aluminum, copper, and then you'll go down to see if it's got less than 15% by weight. Then the tariff is zero, but none of you are importing a tool or competing with a product that's similar to yours that is less than 15. And then you'll get into the 25 as you get into those spaces. Here, just to help you visualize it, we'll run through these very quickly. These are more for your reference. Here's, you're going to see these, Annex 1A, different flat iron and steel products, non-alloys that are going to be at the 50% rate. Here's the actual HTS codes. Aluminum bars and rods are on here. Aluminum plates, copper also are going to be at 50% on the raw metals input. Here's some of the examples on the derivatives. This is the 25% list known as 1B. Some of you might find products that you make on here that you could use and are protecting you from imports, and these are global, not targeted just China. There are no country exemptions or exclusions from these. These are examples of what might be at the 25% rate. You can also see them at that previous link that we had out there. Here's just a little bit easier to read. Stoppers, caps, clasps, hinges, mountings, brackets, fittings. That one, 8302, we know has some of you members that are on here as well. On this 1B, some transformers and parts for electrical equipment, motor generator parts. We know we've got members in both groups that are making components for these that also might be on there as well. And then we also take a look at now the Annex 3. This is one where we probably are going to have a number of members that are importing products that are going to come in and be subject to that 15% tariff on a temporary rate that goes up on January 1 of 28. We're hearing they did this to allow manufacturers to ramp up production and seek alternatives, and without putting down manufacturing for a lot of the tooling and inputs. For those of you that might be away from your desk, we'll just rattle off a handful here for you. These includes 8207 chapters for parts of dies for drawing or extruding metal, metal forming dies, including thread rolling dies, parts of tools for pressing, stamping, or punching, rolls for metal rolling mills in here. They've also got parts for multiple machineries, machining centers for working metal. This doesn't include on this list, but robots, there's some robots that are on here, robotics rather, that are on at a 15% rate. It's important to take a look at these. If you are importing any products from anywhere in the world, you might be getting hit on this as well. That rounds out our 232. We're going to come back and answer the one question here on hot rolled in a moment, but we did want to give you an idea of now the new regime that you all are dealing with. This is permanent, not subject to legal challenges on the Section 232 tariffs, so something to watch closely there as well. Did want to flag for you just on some China retaliatory issues that they're getting ready to negotiate against Trump, so that's not entirely a surprise there. And then I do want to get to Paul to talk about the steel pricing here in just a second, but quick update on USMCA negotiations. We now have a timeline and a schedule for Mexico. You are going to have official talks the week of May 25th. They had their scoping meeting a few weeks ago to identify what is on the table. We know they're going to talk about steel and aluminum, where it's melted and poured, smelt and cast. automotive and rules of origin for components, transshipment by China, and Chinese investments in Mexico. And the U.S. has announced they're going to issue their position on USMCA to withdraw, to change what they want done by June the 1st. So that's pretty significant. We're not quite there on the Canadians, but it definitely shows that there's some progress, and the U.S. and Mexico moving relatively quickly there. Paul, turn it over to you, and we decided to do some math over here. I didn't do the math. Claude did some math over there on the right.
Yeah, Claude's more dependable Omar than
Me.
the liberal arts majors.
Yeah.
As many of you know, we have been tracking steel prices through our Coalition of American Metal Manufacturers and Users, really since the original Section 232 tariffs were put in place in 2018. And as you can see here, the gap between U.S. prices, which the hot roll price for the last steel benchmarker report was $1,133 a ton, which was the highest we've seen since 2022. I checked back, and it is now 172% more expensive than in China, and that is the biggest gap we've seen since 2022 as well. Just one stat not on here, and then also obviously there's the Europe that we track as well. Obviously, and also what's not on here is we also have tracked the capacity utilization rate. As some of you may remember back in 2018 when these were imposed, that the Commerce Department and the first Trump administration said that what they're trying to do is get the capacity utilization rate for the domestic steel industry above 80%. And you could have an opinion on whether the government should be responsible for capacity utilization rates or not, but that was the stated goal. It's still, even after all this is not there, it's about at 79%, but it usually hovers between 74 and 78% for the past year. So this is one reason why you've seen these changes in the Section 232 steel tariffs, and that some manufacturers have been complaining that even with a 25% tariff or a tariff on a derivative product, it's still, because steel prices are so high in the United States, that they're still not able to compete. So we keep a close track. We send these out every couple of weeks, and so we're happy to answer any questions on it. Thank you, Omar.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. And we and I will talk about this question a little bit later. This is significant. Here's came in on hot rolled. Feedback from the mills for hot rolled is that we need to plan on steel being 4 weeks late going forward, and we better get our third quarter orders in right now. They are, quote, full. Any talk of tariff relief on HR steel? So, Paul, before you run, go for it.
There is no talk of tariff relief. I mean, Omar, it seems like the President Trump is committed to steel tariffs. He came into office the second time and immediately doubled the steel tariffs to 50%, and got rid of all the exclusion process, the tens of thousands of exclusions. And he has an ideological commitment to steel tariffs. I don't see any relief coming on the 232s anytime soon.
We agree. And knowing this is public, we'll just state it this. During the fly-in, we did have members of our association go meet with the Trump administration specifically to talk about metals and machinery that's not available in the United States. And so those direct dialogues are ongoing. But Paul, your sentiment there tends to be correct on hot rolled and metals. As we get ready to round out, please feel free to type in any other questions you've got into the Q&A. We just got 3 slides to go and let you go about your day. Goods exempted from tariffs. This we found interesting from Bloomberg, just because honestly it doesn't benefit as much as it does in some other sectors and the consumer directly. But there are a number of goods that have been exempted from those IEEPA and now the 122 tariffs. But we also put up here for what's on it as much as what's not. You're not getting exemptions on those 232 tariffs, to the point that was just brought up and Paul addressed on the steel and aluminum and copper and derivatives. There is zero discussion on exclusion requests and being allowed to petition the government. That is still not something we're hearing. And now they've driven the inclusion process underground a little bit there. As China's imports are decreasing, we're obviously seeing Mexico increase. That's a trend that we've seen going on since 2018. You've seen these numbers here, just even a year over year. That's really quite a significant drop over there. And you're seeing some of the trade between China and others start growing and going in the other direction. And similar, we're getting more in from Mexico than we have in the past. And that's we're now seeing some additional expansions of Asian factories that are going under a PMI relatively significantly over the 50 mark here in the last couple of months to start the year, as you'll seeing the overall South Korea leading some of the way most recently. And then the average electric bill, our final slide here with one more to go. Just again, what we believe is going to be one of a big political issue in certain parts of the country. And here's where the global sourcing, you're seeing now renewables in the green there exceeding the line of coal just barely at the 33, 1/3 of the major electricity generation. So impacts you all from if you're making components for various industries or receiving sources from, and your competition is, that'll bring it out there. As always, you can reach us at the Talking with One Voice. It's our regular podcast that we put out. Feel free to take a look anytime, get you a dose of politics and also the latest on policy in between these monthly webinars. And at any time, you can feel free to reach out to your team at PMA, NTMA, or to us to answer any of your questions. Speaking of which, we're happy to stick around, answer any questions that you all may have, whether it's on the tariffs refund process that's been announced under CAPE or under the new 232 derivative regimes. This, as always, will be sent out afterwards, so it'll be more easy to digest the impact on each of your shops. Not seeing any questions coming in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will talk to you next month. Our next webinar will be on May the 29th at noon Eastern. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your weekend.